Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to take you inside a world that few see but impacts countless lives. The operations behind Texas death row transfers. Texas, known for having the highest execution rate in America, operates a system shrouded in secrecy, discipline, and chilling efficiency. What happens when an inmate is moved from one facility to another is not just a logistical operation. It is a carefully orchestrated procedure designed to maintain control, security, and secrecy, all while navigating the ethical and legal minefields of America's deadliest penal system. These transfers are more than simple relocations. They reveal the inner workings of a system that prioritizes control over transparency, protocol over empathy, and secrecy over public understanding. From the strict protocols governing movement to the psychological impact on inmates, every aspect of these operations is meticulously planned. Today, I will share insights into this hidden world, exploring the mechanisms, risks, and human consequences of death row transfers in Texas. By examining these secretive operations, we not only understand the reality of the death penalty in America, but also confront the moral questions it forces upon us all. Texas death row is the largest in the United States, both in terms of the number of inmates and the notoriety of its execution practices. It houses men and women convicted of the most serious crimes, predominantly murder, and is renowned for its strict, regimented environment. Unlike general prison populations, death row inmates are kept under near-constant surveillance and in highly controlled conditions. They spend the majority of their time in small, single-occupancy cells, often with limited access to recreation or social interaction. The system is designed to maintain absolute security and minimize risk to both staff and inmates, reflecting the broader philosophy of Texas penal policies. Inmates are subjected to rigorous daily routines, including controlled meal times, restricted movement, and extensive monitoring through security cameras, guards, and physical checks. Even the simple act of walking down a corridor or using the recreation yard is carefully choreographed and supervised. Texas death row is also unique in its handling of high-profile prisoners. Inmates awaiting execution are housed in facilities equipped with specialized infrastructure, including reinforced cells, isolated wings, and medical units capable of handling emergencies. The classification system determines where an inmate is placed based on risk assessment, behavioral history, and legal status. Transfers between facilities are not uncommon, but each move is fraught with logistical and security challenges. Furthermore, the sheer scale of Texas death row means that staff must maintain strict protocols to prevent conflicts, manage overcrowding, and ensure that the legal rights of inmates are respected, at least procedurally. Despite these measures, life on death row is psychologically taxing. The combination of isolation, uncertainty about execution dates, and constant surveillance contributes to heightened stress, anxiety, and sometimes aggressive or self-destructive behavior. Ultimately, Texas death row is not just a physical location. It is a microcosm of the state's approach to capital punishment, reflecting its emphasis on control, efficiency, and a rigid adherence to procedure over personal welfare. It serves as the central hub from which all death row transfers, security operations, and execution preparations originate, forming the backbone of one of America's most lethal criminal justice systems. Death row transfers in Texas are not arbitrary. They serve multiple, highly specific purposes that are integral to the management of the state's most dangerous inmates. One primary reason for transfers is security concerns. Certain inmates may be considered high risk due to their history of violence, escape attempts, gang affiliations, or behavior that threatens the safety of staff and other prisoners. In such cases, moving an inmate to a more secure facility or a specialized unit is essential to maintain order and prevent incidents that could compromise the prison system. These transfers are meticulously planned to minimize any opportunity for unrest, resistance, or escape. Another significant reason for transfers is medical necessity. Many death row inmates require specialized care that may not be available at their current facility. This could include treatment for chronic illnesses, mental health issues, or urgent medical conditions. In such cases, inmates are moved to facilities equipped with advanced medical units or access to hospital services. These medical transfers are particularly sensitive because they involve coordinating security while ensuring that the inmate receives proper care, which sometimes creates tension between health professionals and prison authorities. Transfers also occur due to legal and administrative reasons. Inmates may need to appear at court hearings, parole board meetings, or for attorney consultations. Sometimes transfers are used to redistribute populations across facilities to manage overcrowding, balance staffing resources, or accommodate new security protocols. The movement of inmates can also be influenced by changes in death penalty procedures, policy adjustments, or the opening and closing of certain units within the Texas prison system. Despite these operational reasons, the public, and even the families of inmates often receive minimal information about transfers. The secrecy surrounding the timing, route, and logistics of these moves is a deliberate measure designed to prevent security breaches, maintain operational control, and reduce external scrutiny. Inmates may be informed only hours before a transfer, heightening stress and uncertainty, while families are often left in the dark about their loved one's exact location. The consequences of these transfers extend beyond logistics. Each move disrupts the daily routine and mental stability of inmates, often exacerbating feelings of isolation, anxiety, and helplessness. For prison staff, transfers require careful coordination of resources, meticulous planning of security details, and an acute awareness of potential risks at every stage. This complex balance of safety, legal obligation, and operational efficiency underscores the multifaceted purpose of death row transfers within the Texas penal system. The operations surrounding death row transfers in Texas are deliberately cloaked in secrecy, reflecting a system that prioritizes control and security above transparency. From the moment the decision is made to move an inmate, every detail, timing, route, personnel involved, and security measures is tightly controlled and known only to a small group of authorized staff. This secrecy serves multiple purposes, preventing escape attempts, avoiding interference from outside parties, and minimizing potential threats to both inmates and prison personnel. Unlike routine prison activities, these transfers are not publicized or scheduled openly. The public, media, and often even the families of inmates are kept largely uninformed. Guards and transport teams operate under strict instructions, and communication about transfers is limited to essential personnel only. Any lapse in confidentiality could result in serious security breaches, including attempts at external intervention or coordinated inmate disruptions. The clandestine nature of these operations also ensures that inmates remain unaware of exact timelines and routes until the last possible moment, heightening the psychological pressure on those being moved. The secrecy extends beyond just the logistics of the move. The vehicles used for transfers are often unmarked and reinforced, designed to prevent both escape and external interference. Guards are trained in protocols that anticipate every possible scenario, from riots and assaults to medical emergencies or mechanical failures during transport. Contingency plans are mapped out meticulously, including alternative routes, communication checkpoints, and emergency response measures, all conducted with minimal public knowledge. Even within the prison system, information about transfers is compartmentalized. Officers at facilities not directly involved in the operation may have no knowledge of the inmate's movement, ensuring that operational security is maintained. This approach is consistent with Texas' broader philosophy regarding the management of death row inmates. Maintain strict control, reduce predictability, and minimize risk at every level. Beyond the practical reasons for secrecy, there is a psychological dimension. Inmates experience heightened anxiety and uncertainty during these transfers precisely because of the unknown. The lack of information, combined with the visible presence of armed guards and restraints, reinforces the power dynamics of the system. In this way, secrecy is not just a procedural necessity. It becomes a tool of control, shaping behavior and maintaining order within one of the country's most lethal penal systems. Security protocols for death row transfers in Texas are among the strictest and most meticulously planned procedures in the American prison system. Every movement of an inmate is treated as a high-risk operation, demanding careful coordination, rigorous training, and adherence to detailed procedures. The goal is to ensure not only the safety of staff and inmates, but also the integrity of the system itself, minimizing the possibility of escape, assault, or operational disruption. At the heart of these protocols is physical restraint and control. Inmates are typically secured with handcuffs, leg irons, and sometimes waist chains, limiting mobility and reducing the risk of violent resistance. In high-risk cases, additional restraints or specialized equipment may be used depending on the inmate's history, behavioral tendencies, and the perceived level of threat. These measures are not only practical, but also symbolic, reinforcing the authority of the system and the consequences of defiance. Personnel deployment is another cornerstone of security. Transfers involve multiple layers of armed personnel, including correctional officers, tactical response teams, and sometimes external law enforcement support. Each member of the team is assigned specific responsibilities, from vehicle security and route surveillance to immediate response in case of emergencies. The coordination among these personnel is precise, often rehearsed, and strictly monitored through communication devices to ensure seamless operation. The vehicles used for transport are also specially designed for security purposes. Reinforced transport vans, often with separate compartments for each inmate, are employed to prevent contact between inmates or with external threats. Routes are carefully selected and frequently changed to reduce predictability, and escort vehicles may accompany the transport to provide an additional layer of protection. In some cases, transfers may even occur at unconventional hours or use alternative routes to further reduce risk. Security protocols extend beyond the movement itself. At every point, from departure to arrival, there are checkpoints, surveillance, and contingency plans. These include emergency medical support, backup personnel ready to respond to disturbances, and constant communication between facilities to monitor the status of the transfer. Every step is documented and reviewed, ensuring accountability and providing a record in case any incidents occur. Beyond these procedural elements, there is also a psychological component to the security protocols. The strict measures, heavy presence of armed guards, and highly controlled environments serve to reinforce discipline and compliance among inmates. They signal the seriousness of the system and create an environment in which any attempt at resistance is clearly futile. This combination of physical, procedural, and psychological control makes death row transfers in Texas not merely movements of inmates, but carefully orchestrated operations designed to maintain absolute authority. The psychological impact of death row transfers on inmates is profound and often devastating. Unlike routine prisoner movements, these transfers introduce intense uncertainty, disruption, and heightened stress into the lives of individuals already facing the extreme pressures of life on death row. For inmates who are confined to small, isolated cells for 23 hours a day, even brief changes in environment can trigger deep emotional and psychological responses. One of the primary sources of stress is uncertainty about timing and destination. Inmates are often given minimal notice of a transfer, sometimes only hours in advance. The unknown length of travel, potential destinations, and conditions at the receiving facility can generate significant anxiety. This uncertainty compounds the inherent stress of being on death row, where the ultimate outcome, execution, is always looming. The disruption of routine is another major factor. Daily routines on death row, while rigid and austere, provide inmates with a small degree of predictability and psychological stability. Transfers interrupt these routines entirely, removing access to familiar surroundings, personal belongings, and social structures, however limited they may be. Even small comforts, such as a personal item in a cell or regular interaction with certain staff, are temporarily lost, contributing to feelings of disorientation and loss of control. Isolation and confinement during transfers exacerbate these effects. Inmates are often transported alone in reinforced vehicles, with minimal human contact and constant surveillance. The physical restraints, presence of armed guards, and confinement to small compartments amplify the sense of vulnerability and powerlessness. This controlled environment is deliberately designed to prevent escape or violence, but also intensifies fear, anxiety, and sometimes paranoia. The mental health consequences of these transfers can be severe. For some inmates, the stress of being moved may trigger or worsen conditions such as depression, anxiety disorders, or post-traumatic stress symptoms. In cases where the inmate already struggles with mental illness, transfers can precipitate episodes of agitation, aggression, or self-harm. The psychological toll is cumulative. Repeated transfers throughout an inmate's time on death row can leave lasting emotional scars, heightening despair and hopelessness. Transfers also influence social and relational dynamics. Inmates may be separated from others they have formed tenuous connections with, whether for mutual support or simply shared experience. These abrupt separations can amplify feelings of loneliness and isolation. For some, the move may disrupt access to family visits or communication, further cutting off crucial emotional lifelines and increasing the sense of disconnection from the outside world. Ultimately, the psychological impact of death row transfers illustrates that these movements are not simply logistical events. They are high-stress operations that affect inmates' mental and emotional well-being, compounding the already extreme pressures of life on death row. The system's emphasis on control and security comes at human cost, one that resonates deeply within the minds of those confined to one of the harshest environments in the American penal system. Death row transfers in Texas are not only security intensive, but also incredibly complex from a logistical standpoint. Coordinating the movement of high-risk inmates across multiple facilities involves careful planning, precise timing, and a synchronization of numerous personnel and resources. Each transfer represents a delicate balance between efficiency, security, and compliance with legal and procedural requirements. One of the first logistical challenges is route planning. Prison officials must identify secure, efficient routes that minimize the risk of escape, ambush, or interference from the public. Routes are often varied for each transfer to prevent predictability, and contingency plans are developed in case of traffic delays, accidents, or unexpected incidents along the way. This planning requires careful coordination with local law enforcement agencies, emergency services, and internal security teams to ensure that the transfer proceeds without incident. Another major challenge is vehicle preparation and staffing. Specialized transport vehicles must be inspected, reinforced, and equipped with safety and communication devices. Inmates are usually separated into individual compartments or secured seating arrangements, and staff assignments are carefully organized so that each officer knows their responsibilities at every stage of the transfer. Backup personnel are often on standby, ready to respond to any incident, while communication systems must remain fully operational throughout the journey. Timing and coordination are critical components of logistical planning. Transfers must be scheduled to avoid conflicts with other prison operations, such as court appearances, visitation hours, or routine inmate movements. Coordination extends to ensuring that the receiving facility is prepared to accept the inmate, that cells and security measures are in place, and that medical or legal needs are addressed upon arrival. Even minor errors in timing or communication can create vulnerabilities or delays, which the system cannot afford given the high stakes involved. In addition to planning the transfer itself, documentation and compliance present further logistical hurdles. Every transfer requires thorough records, including inmate identification, security protocols, staff assignments, and legal authorizations. These documents must be meticulously maintained for accountability and to ensure compliance with state and federal regulations. In the case of legal disputes or incidents during transfer, these records serve as critical evidence to demonstrate that proper procedures were followed. The logistical complexity is further compounded by emergency preparedness. Contingency plans must address a wide range of scenarios, from mechanical failures to medical emergencies or unexpected threats along the route. Staff must be trained to react swiftly and efficiently, balancing the safety of the inmate, security personnel, and the public while adhering to strict operational protocols. Finally, resource management is a constant concern. Transfers require the allocation of personnel, vehicles, communication equipment, and coordination with external agencies, all of which must be balanced against the daily demands of the prison system. The scale and frequency of these transfers, particularly in a state with the largest death row population in the country, make logistical planning a continuous, high-stakes challenge that requires precision, foresight, and adaptability. While Texas death row transfers are heavily security-driven and shrouded in secrecy, they must also navigate the intricate web of legal oversight and inmate rights. The state's corrections system operates under strict constitutional and statutory requirements, meaning that every transfer must balance operational control with adherence to legal obligations. This creates a tension between maintaining security and ensuring that inmates' fundamental rights are respected. One critical aspect of legal oversight is access to counsel. Inmates on death row retain the right to communicate with their attorneys, and transfers must not impede ongoing legal proceedings. For example, if a transfer coincides with an upcoming court appearance or a scheduled legal meeting, authorities must ensure that communication lines remain open and that the inmate can consult with their lawyer in a timely and confidential manner. Failure to do so could result in legal challenges, delays in proceedings, or claims of rights violations. Medical and mental health rights are another essential consideration. Transfers cannot compromise an inmate's access to necessary medical care. In some cases, specialized facilities may be required to accommodate specific health needs, such as chronic illnesses, injuries, or mental health conditions. Correctional staff must ensure that medical histories, ongoing treatments, and prescriptions accompany the inmate during the transfer, and that appropriate healthcare support is available upon arrival. This requires careful planning and coordination between medical personnel and security teams. The right to humane treatment also governs transfers. Although Texas employs strict restraints and security measures, the use of excessive force or unnecessarily harsh treatment can violate constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. Authorities must carefully balance the need for security with the obligation to treat inmates humanely, monitoring both physical and psychological well-being throughout the process. Transfers are also subject to court orders and administrative reviews. Inmates may be moved in compliance with judicial mandates, such as reassignments related to appeals, legal investigations, or compliance with regulations concerning facility overcrowding. Correctional officers and administrative staff must ensure that all procedures align with legal requirements and that detailed records are maintained to document compliance. These records are critical for defending against potential legal challenges or complaints related to the transfer. Family and public notification laws, while limited in Texas, also play a role in legal oversight. While the state often maintains confidentiality to protect security, there are circumstances where families must be informed of transfers for safety or visitation purposes. Balancing transparency with operational secrecy adds another layer of complexity to the process, requiring staff to carefully navigate legal boundaries while maintaining security. Ultimately, legal oversight in death row transfers highlights a fundamental tension within the Texas system: the need to enforce strict security protocols and maintain control over high-risk inmates, while simultaneously upholding constitutional and statutory rights. Every decision, when to move, how to secure the inmate, which facility to use, is made under the watchful eye of legal frameworks, ensuring that even the most secretive operations remain accountable to the law. Understanding the historical context of death row transfers in Texas is essential to grasp how these operations have evolved and why they are conducted with such precision today. Texas has one of the oldest and most active death penalty systems in the United States, with a history that stretches back over a century. From the early days of capital punishment in the state, the need to securely move inmates between facilities became apparent, often in response to overcrowding, escapes, or evolving security concerns. In the mid-20th century, death row transfers were relatively infrequent, but highly publicized when they occurred, reflecting the smaller inmate population and limited infrastructure. Inmates were often moved between regional prisons for execution, medical treatment, or court appearances, and these transfers exposed significant gaps in security and procedural oversight. Over time, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice developed increasingly sophisticated protocols, learning from incidents that highlighted vulnerabilities in early systems. As the death row population grew in the latter half of the 20th century, transfers became more routine yet highly systematized. The state developed specialized vehicles, reinforced facilities, and compartmentalized operational responsibilities to manage the growing logistical and security challenges. This period also saw the introduction of stricter classification systems, where inmates were assessed based on behavioral risk, sentence status, and medical needs, influencing the timing and destination of transfers. The frequency of transfers today reflects a combination of operational, legal, and security considerations. Inmates may be moved multiple times during their tenure on death row, whether for medical treatment, court appearances, reclassification, or relocation to balance facility populations. Some inmates experience relatively few transfers, remaining in a single facility for years, while others may undergo multiple moves within a short span due to specific security or legal circumstances. Each movement is carefully coordinated, reflecting both the high stakes involved and the cumulative experience of the Texas system over decades. Historical trends also reveal the increasing secrecy and professionalization of transfers. Early transfers were sometimes predictable and lacked coordinated protocols, leaving room for incidents or public scrutiny. Modern practices, however, emphasize discretion, precision, and operational control, incorporating lessons learned from past vulnerabilities. This evolution highlights the tension between transparency and security, illustrating how the Texas system has prioritized control and risk management over public visibility. Finally, understanding the historical context sheds light on why death row transfers are conducted with such rigor. The cumulative experience of decades of capital punishment, combined with the challenges of managing the largest death row population in the country, has resulted in a system that is simultaneously efficient, secure, and psychologically taxing. The historical perspective helps explain not only how transfers are executed today, but also why the secrecy, planning, and procedural discipline surrounding them are considered essential to the functioning of Texas death penalty apparatus. Death row transfers in Texas, while operationally necessary, raise profound ethical and moral questions that challenge both the penal system and society as a whole. At the heart of these concerns is the tension between the state's responsibility to maintain security and order and the human dignity and rights of those who are confined under extreme conditions. Transfers, while procedural, force us to confront the human consequences of a system designed to carry out the ultimate punishment. One major ethical question revolves around the psychological impact on inmates. Repeated transfers, strict restraints, and prolonged isolation can exacerbate mental suffering, potentially constituting cruel and unusual treatment. Even when legal procedures are followed, the human cost is significant. Anxiety, depression, and fear are intensified by uncertainty and forced disruption of routines. This raises the moral dilemma of whether the system can be both secure and humane, or if the very act of moving inmates under these conditions is inherently dehumanizing. Another concern is the secrecy surrounding operations. While operational security is justified, the lack of transparency can prevent public accountability and oversight. Families are often uninformed, advocates have limited access, and media scrutiny is minimal. This secrecy, while protective in intent, can also shield practices that might otherwise be ethically or morally questioned, creating a system in which the full human impact remains largely hidden from public view. Equity and fairness are additional ethical considerations. Not all inmates experience transfers in the same way. Those with greater resources, legal support, or connections may have slightly more predictable or comfortable movements, while others face harsher conditions with minimal notice or preparation. This disparity highlights moral questions about fairness and justice, raising concerns about whether the system treats all inmates equally under a framework that is, by design, rigid and controlling. The very purpose of transfers, which is to facilitate execution and manage a population awaiting death, also invites moral scrutiny. The state exercises profound control over the lives and deaths of inmates, determining when and where they are moved, what conditions they endure, and ultimately, the timing of their executions. Each transfer is a reminder that the system is not merely managing logistics, but actively participating in a process that ends human life, raising questions about the ethical implications of such absolute authority. Finally, the broader societal impact cannot be ignored. The handling of death row inmates, including transfers, reflects society's collective stance on punishment, justice, and human dignity. It forces a confrontation with uncomfortable questions. How much suffering is acceptable in the pursuit of justice? Can a system designed to execute maintain humanity and fairness? What does it say about society when secrecy and control are prioritized over empathy and transparency? In this way, every death row transfer in Texas is not merely a procedural necessity. It is also a moral event, a moment in which law, security, and human conscience intersect. The operations may be precise, efficient, and secure, but they are inseparable from the ethical questions they provoke, highlighting the stark realities of America's deadliest penal system. In conclusion, the operations behind Texas death row transfers reveal much more than the movement of inmates between facilities. They expose a system built on secrecy, precision, and control, where every decision carries immense legal, logistical, and psychological weight. Beyond the procedures and protocols lies the human reality, the fear, uncertainty, and suffering experienced by those confined within one of the most lethal penal systems in the world. As we peer inside these secretive operations, we are forced to confront the difficult questions they raise about justice, morality, and the human cost of maintaining such a system. These transfers are more than logistics. They are a reflection of a society grappling with the balance between security, legality, and humanity. Ultimately, understanding what happens behind the walls of Texas death row challenges us to look deeper, think critically, and engage with the ethical complexities of capital punishment. It reminds us that even in a system defined by rules and control, the human dimension, the lives, emotions, and dignity of those affected cannot be ignored.